Alright, so the All Blacks have named their team to take on the Springboks at Twickenham this Friday. That's what I'm getting into in this video. I'm doing a more general preview as well, but I did a video specifically on the Springbok team news earlier in the week because they name it earlier, so I got a video out then. So I'll focus more on the New Zealand team here, but I will kind of preview the game more generally as well. So there'll be some chat about the Springboks as well. So drop a comment down below. Let me know what you make of the game now that you've seen the 23s for both teams. What sort of occasion, what sort of match you think it's going to be. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. I can't wait for this game. I'm going to be at Twickenham tomorrow night and I think it's going to be awesome. And I think it's quite an interesting moment in time for both of these teams, but in particular the All Blacks, in that they haven't played for a couple of weeks and their first game in the World Cup isn't for a couple of weeks either. So, and I know there's talk about should they rotate, should they rest players, should they avoid injuries or red cards or all that sort of thing. But I think they needed to go strong for this game, as they have done, just because of those two factors. They haven't played for a while, and in a couple of weeks' time, they get their World Cup campaign underway on the opening night in Paris, Stade de France, against the host nation. So they need to be all guns blazing by then. And likewise for the Springboks, they've still got, I know they have played more recently. They played last week in Cardiff. But again, there's a little bit of a break now until the start of the World Cup. So I think that's partly why we've seen both sides go so strong. But let's get straight into it. This is the All Blacks team news. Many of you would have already seen it by now. But I think there are a few interesting things for us to get into in the video. And I had a quick look back to when these sides last played each other in the Rugby Championship, and only 3 changes for the All Blacks since then, since that game. All of them in the pack, and 2 of them in Brodie Retallick and Shannon Frizzell are for injury. Dane Coles is the only one who kind of comes in at hooker, which tells me really that this is pretty much the strongest team for the All Blacks, apart from those couple of injuries. You'd imagine that both of those guys would possibly start or certainly would be in the 23. So it's a fully loaded All Black side, which kind of speaks to what I was saying just a moment ago in terms of needing, I think, the players to get a run out. I don't think they're quite in the position where they can fully rest players, because then they'd be looking at maybe a month, since a lot of those guys had played when they kick off the World Cup in that absolutely blockbuster of a game on the opening night. So I think that's part of the reason it is such a strong side. There are a number of interesting things to actually go through in the video. First of all, Luke Jacobson at 6. That's his first start of the year, filling the boots of Shannon Frizzell, who is a massive loss. I thought he'd been brilliant so far in the Rugby Championship. I've been saying on the channel I wanted him to kind of grasp that jersey by the scruff of the neck and make it his own for a while, and I feel like he was starting to do that, so I hope he's not out too long. But looking forward to Jacobson getting a run in the jersey. Hasn't played much this year really. I think Ian Foster spoke about it, and that they just wanted to see a little bit more of him, so he gets his first start at 6. The back line is the same as well, and the important thing, or the interesting thing I think for me in that, is remember how important the aerial game was in the Rugby Championship. If you cast your minds back to that match where the All Blacks were brilliant for 20 minutes and kind of gave themselves a lead that South Africa weren't able to claw back, the aerial game was absolutely critical for them and was an area that they really, really targeted. With Telea and Jordan on the wings, Barrett at fullback once more, I think once again that is going to be an area of this game that maybe the All Blacks look to get supremacy. It's certainly be one of the areas that I'll be keeping a keen eye on at Twickenham, so that's quite fascinating. And then a 6-2 bench split as well. It's not something the All Blacks do often. You see, obviously, the Springboks do it a lot. England have done it quite a lot over the years. We saw Wales try it at the weekend. Quite a few other teams do it relatively regularly or semi-regularly. The All Blacks less so. And it is something that I think they'll consider at the World Cup. That's something Ian Foster's spoken about, that could be an option for them when it comes to the World Cup, when it comes to rotation. So how the replacements go, the impact they have, how it kind of works in terms of their side, then that will be interesting as well. And that's kind of why Anton Lienert-Brown is one of the replacements on the bench, just because he's a little bit more versatile across that back line. And the replacement scrum half, Cam Roigard, hasn't had much minutes at all so far this year, just the one cap, obviously. So he's going to get some minutes off the bench in place of Aaron Smith. I reckon they'll maybe try and get him into the game fairly early. Could be wrong there. I know Aaron Smith is the guy, isn't he? Brilliant scrum half, arguably after Antoine Dupont, the best in the world. Certainly his passing, I think, is probably the best in the world. But I wonder whether they'll want Roigard to get a few more minutes under his belt ahead of the World Cup. And in particular, if you look at, the occasion that he's going to be coming on into. It could be, if it's a tight game, it's a sellout at Twickenham under the lights on a Friday. That's a pretty good learning experience for a young guy to come in his international career. So maybe they'll look to bring him off the bench a little bit earlier than we've seen previously. We'll wait and see. We'll wait and see how they operate. But it's a really strong New Zealand side. As I say, I think barring a few injuries, it's probably their strongest side. So I'm excited to see how they go. The final point, or kind of transitioning onto the Springboks, I suppose, is obviously Caden Moodie at 13 has been the headline selection in their team news. I have gone back and watched some of the videos of him when he played kind of schoolboy rugby or like academy rugby for the Bulls, where he played 13 an awful lot. With ball in hand, he looked absolutely brilliant. It kind of makes sense why they put him out onto the wing. I have seen some concerns at that age, and that obviously was a couple of years ago now, but at that time in his life, in terms of the defensive work at 13, and look, he's come on a lot since then. In the last 2 years, he's gone from kind of schoolboy rugby to being a Springbok and being a damn good winger as well, if you look at his try scoring record early on in his international career. But will there be concerns for him defensively at 13? That's probably the area of his game that I'm most interested to see when it comes to him at outside centre. And will that be something that the All Blacks look to try and exploit or try and isolate early on with that really experienced backline that they've got? As I say, no changes from the team they selected in the Rugby Championship when these sides met. So quite whether that is something they target, maybe you don't obviously change the whole game plan just for that one guy at 13, but I think it's definitely something that they will be thinking about. In terms of Moodie with ball in hand, we know what he can do. What can he do on the defensive side of the ball is going to be interesting. Going to be interesting to have a look at. So as I say, really excited for this game. Ahead of the World Cup, I think it's just interesting timing, isn't it, as well? With a couple of weeks to go, both sides going strong, injuries, red cards, as we've seen over here, to do with England, can all have an impact on it. I just think ultimately the All Blacks and the Springboks is possibly the biggest rivalry in world rugby. It's certainly up there. There's no friendlies when it comes to these two teams. They're going to be going full-blooded, particularly once you get out there and it's a sellout at Twickenham. A lot of fans who are going to be passionate about being able to see their sides. A lot of New Zealanders and South Africans in London that don't get to see their side in the flesh as often as they would like. I think it's going to be a great occasion and a really interesting occasion to see where both of these teams are, particularly after that Rugby Championship game in New Zealand, where the All Blacks had an unbelievable opening 20 minutes. The game was a bit closer after there, but South Africa couldn't get themselves back into it. Where the two teams are on a neutral field with very strong sides out will give us a pretty good indication, I think, to where they are heading into the World Cup, with both of them having big games to start the World Cup. I've already mentioned the All Blacks facing France, but Scotland, don't forget, wait in line for South Africa at the start of the World Cup pool stages as well. And the way Scotland have been playing in a couple of their warm-up games against the French, they look pretty good, particularly in attack. So a lot on the line. We'll see how it goes. As I say, I'll be there at Twickenham. I'll do a video afterwards, but drop a comment down below. Let me know what you make of it, in particular that All Blacks team selection. Like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one.